Well, Gunfire Games came out with quite the sequel to Remnant. Yeah, this game has become quite the obsession of mine of late. It is just a perfect sequel on so many levels. And with the final DLC, The Dark Horizon, just come out like nearly 3 months ago at this point. When this was uploaded, it was released in September of 2024, and it's the end of the line for the game. But it released a boss rush mode with all the major bosses from the three worlds plus one additional. So, what's a better way and better time to rank and look at my favorite bosses from this masterpiece of a game? The rules to be included in this list are simple. If you can show up in Boss Rush, you can show up on this list. And that only eliminates two bosses that had any chance of getting high, being Cancer and Venom. The Huntress and Labyrinth Sentinel are also gone. If you've played the game, you know who I'm talking about. And that's just because they're not in Boss Rush, I'm sorry. And Boss Rush is just quite clean cut off because it gives me a nice 30 bosses to rank here. And simply put, we're going to have a look at my favourite and least favourite and see how they evolve in quality over the course of the list. Remember, this is just my opinion. I love this game, but my opinion might not be the same as yours. And if the gameplay looks quite bad, I'm just playing badly, alright? Don't need to point that out. I am just playing quite bad in this footage. So, let's begin. The Abomination. Yeah, that's about right. The Abomination is a giant grotesque meatball found in Naruto's sewer area, and could easily be your first boss of the game, and would not be very good. It is very reminiscent of the first game, Remnant One's many elite evolutions, but the worst elite evolutions. Not the ones where they uniquely evolve them, but this is just a boss variant of the Elite Evolution in a really basic arena. And the Abomination's normal Elite variants are not the most fun. It does the worst part about them too, where it only has attacks taken from other enemies in the game, except for its role. And even then, you could make an argument about that. Otherwise, it is just going to get stagger locked by you breaking its weak point, or you're going to get stagger locked by it slapping you into a corner. This boss fight is easily the worst in the game, and the only time I would say the Elite Evolution mechanic was used incorrectly in this entire game. The Bloat King. This another sewer-based monster, this time found on Lossum, the Bloodborne, Dark Souls Bloodborne world. Bloat King is at least a unique attempt at a new design, but the Bloat King, well, let's just say Pennywise kind of had a field day with this nightmare. It's at least a unique idea that kind of got messed up in execution, as it's a large arena with a bunch of the little slugs all over the place, with the large one on the roof shooting out its weak spot heart that shoots back at you. The problem here is, no one likes parkour. Just no one likes parkour. And Bloat King overemphasizes parkour in a Souls game. At least you're shooting it, and it's not an insta-kill like a certain someone. But honestly, the amount of little slugs down there cause enough annoyance that it doesn't make it much better. Otherwise, Bloat King will just zap you from anywhere on the map, and it's just a really annoying but easy fight. I think I've only died to this thing once, but overall, Bloat King is at least an attempt at something new, which is more than I can say about Abomination. Legion. Ah, yes. This game seems to have emphasized most of its bad boss design into one side boss from each world. As after Legion, I don't have as much hatred for any boss in the game. He is located on Yaesha, and is somehow more basic than Abomination, but is a unique enemy at the same time. The boss fight simply has a giant, whatever that is, eyeball, Eye of Sauron, chase you around and make you go mad. And yeah, that's what I'm feeling during this fight, as it has no weak spot and will only take subsequently decent damage when it's attacking you. It's a guaranteed damage stare that only takes full damage when you're getting hurt by it. Otherwise, it's got a single shockwave and a few adds that constantly respawn. Legion's slightly better than Bloat King, and that's because the adds are so much more reduced that it's almost a non-issue half the time. But Legion, being found on Yaesha, and being my first boss of the game when I first played it, was not a great introduction, but was certainly better than the previous two. But we're on to bosses now that I genuinely think are actually pretty enjoyable, even if they have more issues than they do have positives. Primogenitor. We're going to go with Primogenitor. Is the first boss in the game that feels really unique in a non and completely annoying way. The Primogenitor is the other option other than Abomination, so have fun with that. Unless you have the DLC, of course. But Primogenitor will take over these giant flying hive things, which I have no idea where they're from. But you shoot them down, you can shoot the boss, which is a concept that's seen before, but it's a nesting ground kind of feel, and there is multiple different ones that will drop other enemies out. The Primogenitor is just the main source. So overall, Primogenitor is interesting, but can be quite annoying when he grabs onto you constantly. But I would definitely prefer him to Abomination, as at least there's a consistency with this fight, and is very unique, especially compared to our previous characters that we had to kill. The Corruptor. The first world boss on this list, and easily the worst. As we will soon see, the world bosses are usually more unique, larger, and more difficult boss fights in Remnant 2, and on average are usually better than our side bosses. But the Corruptor isn't just not. Yeah, it's very annoying, as the boss controls the Golem, or the remains of a Pan Guardian, to attack you, while it itself destroys 3 platforms. This wouldn't be a problem, as you would swap between the platforms as he blows them up. But the two things is Remnant 2 has a bit of parkour, which is not always the best idea in a Souls game, and it's not as accurate as it should be in Remnant 2. But it's even worse with the fact that the golem that's attacking you is large enough to take up the entire row or platform you're on, while the moot points where you have to move across change every time. So he can easily block you off, making that an issue, as well as falling off is an instant death. And this is also on top of the fact that killing the golem doesn't end the fight, it only reveals the Corruptor's weak point, as it also swarms the field with ads, a bunch of the flying bird, root, butterfly things. This in conjunction means the Corruptor can be enjoyable when you get good rolls and good RNG on the spawning of the attacks from the Golem, the location of the Corruptor's laser, and the spawning of the pathways across platforms, but when you don't, this boss fight can be extremely difficult and painful, making the Corruptor easily the worst world boss in Remnant 2. Magister Dulain. The first of the multiple Fey bosses you can fight on Lossum. Magister Dulain is easily the worst of these boss fights, but he is at least manageable, as he has only a few attacks, and looping him around the arena usually solves most of them. He'll either throw poison, or fireballs, or other enemies at you. It's really the same 3 things, with the exception of a tongue grab, which I believe is an instant kill, but is the easiest thing to dodge if you're prepared. But otherwise, Magister Julane just has a really hard crit spot to hit, and is a lot tankier than he really should be. Otherwise, he's really just a boring fight with an insta-kill that you need to keep an eye out for. But he's really nothing special overall, just a tanky boss that shouldn't last as long as he does. Our first DLC boss comes from the Forgotten Kingdom DLC, and genuinely, with the boss quality across the roster for this DLC, it is definitely the least appetizing to play through, as 2 of the bosses are lower down on the list, with one closer to the mid-ground. You'll see who the other one is later. But the Cinderclad Forge, its main issue is its lack of mobility, compiled with its annoying crit spot being tiny holes that you need to shoot the bullet through, as well as having a suction vacuum that pulls you in straight into its bullets and makes certain parts of this boss extremely easy and other parts extremely irritating to avoid, as, you know, it's going to pull you directly into some attacks, pull you directly out of some attacks when the vacuum's not active. All attacks are kind of simple to dodge, except the Fire Claw, which can be annoying depending on which one it's doing. The large slam immediately is a lot harder than the slam across the arena. But overall, it's kind of just annoying to have to deal with the vacuum and also aiming into those tiny holes at the same time. And yeah, that's probably the main issue with this boss fight is the fact that it has a vacuum and a tiny crit spot at the same time. Most of the attacks, as I previously stated, are just fine. Nothing too special in that department. But, yeah.
They called me crazy. Who's crazy now? Feast on this, bastards! Kill 'em! Kill 'em all!
Gwendol, the Unburnt. Now, this is the first boss that I always enjoy when I fight. There's no real RNG. She's just really simple and easy 90% of the time. This is because her mechanics are she's on a large platform in the middle, and you just need to move around to angle correctly as she throws Molotov cocktails at you. The hardest part of this fight is getting that angle correct with the other adds in the arena, but her health bar and her lack of instant burn you down damage is very noticeable when she only really applies fire damage most of the time when you get clipped, and fire damage is the easiest status to immediately remove, as stop, drop, and roll does work. After all, Gwendol is a simpler fight in the overarching of the game, but it's a nice simple fight, unlike some of the previous entries.
Why am I still Shadow Split? I should be whole. I should be me. Why is it not enough? The screams. My screams. It will never end. Not until every beast is dead and gone. Crushed and dead!
Lyjusa, Lyjusa, Lyjusa. The final boss of the Forgotten Kingdom DLC, and a very painful fight. The main problems we find with this fight is a lot of damage and annoyance, as well as it being stalled out longer than it really should be. For starters, when you start this fight in anything other than boss rush mode, you will have a 15% armor penalty, which is very painful as it amplifies all her damage and will also amplify all my issues with the fight. Her first phase, whenever her weak spot is not shown, she is extremely painful. Whenever it is shown, she is aggressive, but with the easiest attacks in her entire arsenal, which might be a design choice, but it does cause a lot of pain outside of it. So Lyjusa's main issue in the first part is she will launch these weird golden spikes onto the ground, and they will always explode at the worst possible time and instantly hit you really painfully whenever you're trying to dodge a different attack, like her lightning quick javelin strike thing. But the issue with this is they cover about half the stage, so otherwise you're either giving up damage opportunities to dodge this, which you need to do to unlock her weak spot, as that happens after a certain amount of damage has been done, or you're getting exploded for ridiculous amounts of damage. This either stalls out the fight or kills you quicker than it should. And this will cause massive issues as well if you don't have high damage later. Mostly when she has her weak spot exposed, she's fine. She has the Beyblade attack, she has the smash attack, all that sort of thing. She's really simple up until those explosive spikes. Then the wall phase is painful as it goes on for way too long, and her weak spot only shows up sometimes, so there's only a few attempts to even slow down the phase. It is mandatory to kill her and progress the phase to survive the phase, but that leads us into the final segment, which is kind of annoying for any player who wants to play it slower or wants to have a more interesting build, as it's just a DPS check. There's nothing else to it. It's kill her before she kills you, and that's really just not fun. So overall, I'd say, even though Corruptor is a strictly worse boss, I end up having more fun on average with Corruptor than I do with Lyjusa. though Lyjusa is a strictly better fight. Now we're not just ragging on the Forgotten Kingdom DLC. Let's have a talk about the Nerudian Reaper from the Dark Horizon DLC. This would be the first boss you fight in a playthrough. If you go for the main path, there is the alternate path of going straight to the final boss in the Dark Horizon DLC. But the Nerudian Reaper is an evolution of one of the two new elites, the big spider harvesters, and are definitely the worst of the two elites. Genuinely, they have some issues, mainly with any of their jump attacks having really annoying angling problems. But the Nerudian Reaper only gets one or two of those sort of attacks. The main problem with this fight is those attacks, but also the explosive gas, which lingers longer in this fight than the normal variants. That, compiled with the slowing down web, will catch you more often than it won't, which is a design choice, I know, but it's a poor one, as the explosion does too much damage to have an arena, which is constantly shrinking with slowdown traps that catch you in the explosions. It can be extremely annoying too, when in the later phases, he will only do that attack or only won't do that attack. For some reason, his RNG either emphasizes the robot gas attacks or the ghost laser attacks. There's kind of nothing else it really does. But overall, Nerudian Reaper is not that bad, but does have some design issues.
At last, a fresh catch.
Our first contender from the Awoken King DLC is here, being the Sunken Witch. Now, the Sunken Witch is not really a witch, as she tries to give you tetanus with her rusted anchor. Maybe that's what it is, the most powerful poison. But the Sunken Witch isn't a witch, really. But overall, she is at least an interesting fight, as it's one of those smaller arena fights as we were talking about earlier. But instead of the arena shrinking over time, the arena grows over time as she breaks platforms and entranceways into the arena. This allows you to be able to move the witch in specific ways to make the fight easier, as some of her attacks are a lot harder to dodge than to outrange, so you want to have more room to do this. The Sunken Witch is a lot more interesting than a lot of our previous non-world bosses, and at least this time the mechanics are very sound and works extremely well, just having some issues and RNG with the angling she starts her attacks from does cause this fight to flicker a little further to the bottom end of the list.
To shut it down. Once complete, I can gain access and save Nerud.
Shalhala. We're gonna go with Shalhala. Guardian of Nerud. This is the Overdrive pin variant. I have removed all variations, excluding the original two from Nerud, as their variations are extremely different fights, unlike any of the others, which are different ways to complete the original fight. Shalhala Guardian of Nerud Physical, one of the main reasons it's a lot further down is the spectacle variant of the fight. I prefer massively, And so Shalhala, Guardian of Nerude in the physical variant is a lot further down, just because there is a near strictly better version of its fight. The same will be with Talratha when he shows up, though Shalhala, Guardian of Nerude has its issues as well as its many problems. I would say both variants do have, but Shalhala Physical has some other very pronounced ones. Specifically, a lot of issues with the laser hitboxes. You can dodge very obviously, but it will still do a little bit of damage. It won't stagger you for some reason, as well as the many issues with some of the bullet hell segments being too pronounced in physical compared to spectral, as well as the simple but annoying fact that both variants really like guarding their little weak spot orb, but the physical variant proceeds to bombard you a lot more when it's active compared to the spectral, which bombards you less when it's active, making the weak spot a lot less prominent. But overall, the real reason it's down here is I believe the spectral version is just a strictly better version of this fight, and that is why I kind of can't rank it above the average, unlike some of the other bosses. Shrewd. Shrewd is a really interesting one, as this is the only boss that seems to be designed off a boss from the original game, being Shroud. And it's a massive improvement to the point that Shrewd here is our average line. Shrewd is the most average boss in the game, and this is our point where we've moved beyond the average. Two bosses I think are just over the average after him. But overall, let's actually talk about Shrewd. Shrewd is the Archer boss, as I have stated. If you've played the original, Shroud was the Archer boss. And in this game, unlike the original, it's a great comparison point, as Shroud had ads all over the place and was very problematic because of that. He was painful. But Shrewd keeps them limited, unlike his counterpart, and uses his bow and arrow in multiple ways with explosive and rapid fire, both taken from Shroud, but improved here with an ad spawning attack and a melee attack, as well as spawning in 3 corners of the arena, so you need to keep on constant move between the phases. He is a very average line for this game, as he has no mechanics I think are extremely interesting or problematic, and he also has nothing that I would say is amazingly well done.
Great.
We're on our way back to Nerude, and we have the Custodian's Eye. Now, this boss is interesting to say the least. And my main problem with it comes down to its movement of the platforms and its emphasis on parkour. As we have stated before, any boss that has an emphasis on parkour in a game that, kind of doesn't do parkour perfectly, is going to have a problem. And the Custodian Eye, I believe, is our highest rated boss that has a large parkour aspect. As that is the only attack I dislike to some degree, though, but it's quite a dislike of that attack. Plus, it's multiple blue laser spectral beam that kind of targets you down and is extremely difficult to dodge at the same time as getting damage in, which is the same to go with our parkour attack. But when it's not doing either of these attacks, the boss is extremely enjoyable, as it will do a tracking laser that follows just behind you, and it will explode slowly, so you need to move in new directions constantly. Spawn some minions that it uses an attack to do and are extremely weak, and also will do the upgraded elite variant laser across the stage, back across, and it will move pillars up to make this easier to dodge, which is its one unique movement, with the platform that isn't annoying in any way. Overall, the Custodian's Eye has some extremely well done features and some slightly poorly done features, but not enough to drop it below the average.
The only life the Drazir have found in eons. All that is left in this universe. To continue without would be a great loss. So, we will not do so. Your will is not greater than that of the universe, nor my own. You will join us, small one, no matter the form.
Tal Ratha kind of has a lot of the same issues as Shalhala, as in his physical form, once again, he is a strictly worse fight than his spectral metaphysical form later. I have him higher up simply because normal Tal Ratha is nothing to really go on about. He's just a big enemy that has some special attacks and some ad spawns, but nothing that causes too many issues anywhere. He just has a very cool design and some interesting attacks where he throws some of the explosive crates from earlier, but otherwise he's a really basic fight, and I don't have really anything to say about him, and that's why he's above the Custodian's Eye, but can't go any higher, simply because he might as well just be an oversized normal enemy with a few additional attacks, with the metaphysical version being a much improved version of the fight. So that would be why Tal Ratha is currently so low, but above the average, as he has no infuriating mechanics, but he has nothing to go on about. He's just really basic. The Stone Warden, the final of the 3 bosses that can be found within the Forgotten Kingdom DLC, and is the exact middle ground, the exact middle of the list. And he is definitely the best one. Is he the best boss in the game? No. But he isn't as problematic as anything before. His boss fight is quite simple, as he just tries to mine you with the pickaxe he has. I don't know why it's a pickaxe, but he's got a pickaxe. Otherwise, he has just a few different versions of his spin attacks, and you just need to time the dodge correctly, until his phase transition, where he basically plays wizard chess with some explosive pieces that, why are they explosive? We will never know, and who designed this? What's the reasoning behind this? Is this an actual chessboard? Maybe, we are in a Colosseum. But this phase change is a really enjoyable phase change, as the attacks are placement-based, which is what this game does best. So to get attack openings against the Stone Warden here, you have a position you have to get into where the chess pieces aren't going to attack. It's a really nice positioning-based movement. Otherwise, his weak spot is on the nicer end, as it's consistent but difficult to hit, as it's the crystal in his chest. He can just be a little aggressive at sometimes, but he's one of the better bosses, and easily the best boss from the Forgotten Kingdom DLC.
Enter, mortal. Lives such as yours are too short to stand on hesitancy. Know that you stand in the presence of the divine, lord of all that surrounds you, and true-born heir to the one true king's throne. You may not be of the Fae, yet you reap the benefits of this kingdom with every breath.
The Red Prince. Now, the Red Prince is a very interesting one, simply because he has a mechanic I loathe, I genuinely hate, but almost everything else I completely love, and that's why he's above the average. But this mechanic drops him from a top 10 position all the way down here, and that's every attack he has applies Curse, which is a max health permanent drain. So until you end the fight or use an item, you will have increasingly max health diminished until you basically become one-shot if you get hit too many times. This wouldn't be a problem, as usually it takes a few hits to build up, but not on the Red Prince. He is a one-shot, your curse, each time your max health is decreased. And this is especially painful in his second part, where he brings in the fire directly into the middle, locking you in a 1v1 close quarters duel. This, again, is extremely well designed, as well as his attack pattern. It's just how quickly slipping up kills you, especially with the fact if he hits you into the wall, you'll get multiple flame status effects. And as I said, stop, drop, and roll works earlier, but you really need to maintain stamina in this phase, and using it to roll makes massive issues, as this will now allow you to no longer roll when you attempt to dodge Red Prince when he enters this arena. Otherwise, all his attacks are extremely well designed. He is an extremely difficult fight, but much nicer compared to boss fights, which are a drop off the map and you're dead. Overall, Red Prince would be a lot higher if he didn't punish you for longer periods. The more you get hit, the more he punishes you, as the healing required after taking substantial damage should be punishment enough. Dark Horizon DLC to the rescue. Before the DLC, the only options for a underground boss in Narude were either the Abomination, our worst boss, or the Primogenitor, which is really low down as well. But the Amalgam Duo is a much better encounter, as simply put, it's not aggressive, there's not too many ads, it's not a random dice roll completely to see if you're going to die or you're going to win in seconds. The Amalgam Duo is an extremely enjoyable fight, with one issue I would say overall. So how it works is you get the first Amalgam, he does his attacks, he will jump at you, he will move across the arena, he will flail around mindlessly and shoot mini water spouts at you. Until he hops in the water or is killed, and the other one will spawn. You want to try and kill him before the second one spawns, as this is going to be extremely helpful for you overall, as one less boss is one less boss. The second boss uses the water-based attacks a lot more. The only real issue I have with this boss fight is the attacks are so consistently on you. The massive wave, the multiple water spouts, the grabs, all of that is constantly on you to the point your stamina is almost completely depleted at every second of the second phase, which causes the Amalgam Duo to be extremely punishing, like the Red Prince. Especially if both are around, you're not going to have any stamina, which is extremely painful, especially when you're playing this game single player. But overall, the Amalgam Duo is much better than the previous two, as there is a lot of consistency, a lot of good design here, and overall, I enjoy this boss fight quite a lot. Kaola's Shadow. We're back on Yasha's main route-based bosses here, and Kaola's Shadow is a massive turning point, as it is a heavily aggressive boss that is done really well. As Kaola's Shadow is constantly attacking you with either the tentacles or her teleportation through the ground and smashing with her massive tentacle arm, or her multiple melee weapons on the other side of her body. Kaola's Shadow also has a really nice phase transition, where she disappears and summons a bunch of tentacles. It's a damage-based phase transition, which is great, and it will also require you to keep moving, especially in the earlier phases where there is about 6 tentacles you need to kill, as being near them too long is a death sentence, as they will all hit you constantly. The one other really interesting part of this boss fight is the arena itself. Even though she's a massive root monster made out of grass and things, she is immune to fire because we're fighting in the water arena, which is a nice touch. And also, the flowers in the water are a subtle hint of what ground is standable, and everything without the flowers on the floor is deeper water that will slow your movement down and make it much easier for Kaola's Shadow to kill you. This boss fight blended a really originally looking simple arena that is extremely complex in the end, with extremely simple but nice and aggressive tendencies from the boss that are never that aggressive or too aggressive. The only issue can be sometimes you can get trapped in parts of the arena and have massive issues there. But overall, Kaola's Shadow is a really well-balanced fight, and we're kind of past things where I would say, I don't know, it's too much aggression, not enough aggression, not a nice arena, unique idea but done poorly. We're past all that. We're all really good boss fights at this point.
I am the blade of the king, and your torment is my pleasure!
Sometimes the original is always the best. Brune, Blade of the King, coming from the first DLC, is the best DLC side boss we have to talk about today, and the third best side boss in the game. Now, why do I love Brune? Well, Brune is a heavily physical-based boss. His only ranged attacks are in his phase transition, otherwise he is constantly on you. But this isn't a bad thing, as the arena is a straight line, very straight bridge, which has enough for 3 people to stand in one row, so he never blocks you off, and you can loop around him to get good attack windows. His most common attack will be charging up this sphere, which has a really sick animation if you get killed by it. But, in the end, Brune is just an extremely aggressive melee attacker, but if he gets low enough, he will jump to the other side of the bridge and will force you to chase him down with archers and him throwing spears. This is a great signal to change into Phase 2, as in Phase 2 his aggression increases and he has more range closing attacks that are quicker than our previous attack with the charge, as he will jump towards you. Unlike many of the Narud spider things, these jump attacks are very well telegraphed and are very visible and are consistent with where they land. Overall, Brune is an extremely amazing fight, with the tiniest possible issue being his weak spot is only exposed in the second half of the fight. That is my only problem with Brune, and it's enough to keep him just out of the top 10 bosses, which we are entering now. final Narude side boss comes in the form of the Astropath, a base game evolution of those ghost enemies with the skeleton, you know the ones, that you will find on your way here that would possess things. This time, this larger version possesses what seems to be a navigation console. And in this case, he will either aggressively attack you normally with his claws or his ranged strikes, which are aggression, but during these aggressive windows, he leaves large enough windows for you to get attacks into his weak spot or heal, so his punishment for hitting you too much that you would need to heal is a damage window loss, which is what's meant to happen, but isn't consistently making you lose multiple windows, or always it comes down to pure dodge skill. And otherwise, he has two massive change attacks that change the entire arena. He will either go into the massive console and possess it, create a sort of Fall Guy minigame sort of thing, where he will either shoot a shockwave out immediately that you have to roll through, or create multiple that you need to stand between. This is a very consistent damage window, as these attacks leave massive openings between them, but he can't be weak spotted as a equivalent. Unlike many of our lower bosses that would weak spot in the worst moments, he weak spots when he's aggressive, which allows you to get damage off if you're feeling lucky or feeling skillful, and when he's doing most his damage, he's not got a weak spot out as he's got massive gaps between those attacks. And he only has one other major move, which is an ad spawn, which darkens the whole arena, which is a nice visual setting, and then you kill the multiple ads and he respawns. This is the closest thing I have to a dislike of this fight, as there's maybe one or two too many ads, as it's only like 6 of the ghosts, but overall it's not a game changer really, it's just a nice slower phased section of the fight that will leave you with a moment to reload without actually losing any time to shoot the boss.
Once complete, I can gain access and save Narude.
Have Shalhala, the spectral variant. What makes this version, the spectral version, so much better than the physical version that was down the list in 19th place, a full 10 places behind the spectral version? So, what makes this better in my opinion is the more tampered aggression and the moves at which the weak spot is vulnerable. It is, again, used in the better manner where the weak spot is usually vulnerable in the moves where it's positioning based, not rolling or dodging based, that you need to do to dodge the attacks. Unlike the physical version, which is almost exclusively dodging based, position will not help you most of the time. And the attacks where it's not vulnerable are the more heavy attacks that take up more of the stage and are usually just harder to dodge overall. So this allows Shalhala Spectral to feel more natural flowing fight. Otherwise, the main thing is the lighting is actually a lot nicer in this fight. I know that sounds kind of silly to have it so high up and have the lighting as the main change in between them, but it does make a massive difference, the lighter environment. Also, the physical version has this also, but I would be out of my mind to not point out the amazing OST made for this whole game by Rob Westwood. So let's just play a bit of that here. And I can't help but point out the amazing soundtrack this game does have. Well, Shalhala Spectral has a better soundtrack, better visuals. It's just an improved version over the physical part of this game. have reached, in my opinion, the best side boss in the entire game, in 8th place, so our remaining bosses are all world bosses and are all amazing, but Mother Mind is my personal choice for the best side boss, even though some of the other bosses are strictly better in a more combat sense. Mother Mind emphasizes and does extremely well two major factors, which is aiming and positioning. One of the major mechanics of this boss fight is every quarter of her health, she will destroy the platform you're on and you'll have to move. So you need to be prepared and also then be positioned to dodge the rock afterfall. This also moves into the massive weak spot she constantly has, but the main thing when aiming is aiming between the massive weak spot and the adds that spawn each time she breaks the platforms, as well as being prepared to dodge her 2 attacks, which both have you dodge to the side, but they are very tightly timed. This boss fight is a lot simpler, but each of the smaller, simpler steps are a lot easier to dodge if you understand, but are a lot harder to dodge if you don't. Overall, Mother Mind's probably the most interesting inclusion in my personal top 10, but I personally believe Mother Mind is the best side boss.
Excellent and inevitable.
Talratha, in the metaphysical form, is such an improvement over Talratha originally. And this is mainly because this boss has a much larger arena, a lot faster, a lot more aggressive, where the original Talratha is a little too passive most of the time. The weak spot opens more consistently when it's in a fair place to attack, as well as just genuinely being a more complete version of the fight. He doesn't feel like a regular enemy anymore. He feels like a boss. He feels like a world boss. And in this case, he has a lot more attacks that he doesn't have in the original, including shockwaves, star blasts, the rain of star whirlwind you see. All of that is amazingly designed. He has the run attack, which he would normally do once in his physical, but now he will phase in and out of reality to come back and forth. He has a much larger arena, which is the one reason I would say the original Talratha might have a tiny bit of issue to some people. He has a tiny arena, but this larger arena allows for this lot more active boss, which makes for a much more enjoyable encounter, as well as the fact he's metaphysical, I find very funny, and as well as the fact that on the road, everything in the spectral world just seems quite a lot more competent and more of an enjoyable fight compared to their physical counterparts. But overall, Talratha was the original best world boss for Narude before the DLC came along, and maybe shook that up a little bit.
My sister never told me. Never knew. So many ages wasted. Nurturing dreams. Rearing them like children. Always coddling. Never tasting. But now, Namue's juicy plot has led to such delicious outcomes. Come here, treat. This world holds such delectable delicacies, but you, you are exquisite.
Now, we've looked at almost all the world bosses from both Narud and also Yaesha, but this is our first world boss from Lossum. And simply put, Lossum has the highest consistency when it comes to the world bosses, as there's not a single one I would have any real problem with. Nightweaver is who we have here, and the only thing I would complain about Nightweaver is some hitboxes are a little off, and that's really it. The Nightweaver is also the only world boss outside of any of the special worlds, so Root Earth or the Labyrinth, which has a second health bar, and the only one of two bosses on this entire list that does. And simply put, it's a great use of this restricted mechanic, as the first phase is out in the front courtyard of her asylum that people have been taken to when they see the Nightweaver, and she has some very simple attacks. She's very quick and flickery, she flashes all around the arena, and she has one ad spawn attack where she's also vulnerable, which is quite simply a good choice moment. You can either weaken the boss or kill her ads. I usually find it easier to kill the ads and then possibly weaken the boss if she still has time, as she usually leaves it open a little extra after the ads are spawned. But otherwise, once you kill her first phase, she'll drop down dead, and then proceed to grab you and teleport you inside the asylum for the second phase, where she crawls all over the place, sneaks through the walls, grabs you, has a very special grab that she'll knock you onto the ground and try and suck out your soul. It's very intense, especially when you compile this with the music. Westwood doing amazing once again. And with this, makes it such an intense and also difficult fight, as you have this vastly powerful night demon thing clawing at you from the walls, being very aggressive constantly. But in the end, it's also very tense, with the shadowy arena and the fact that she can appear out of any wall and you don't want to stay near any surfaces too long. Though the Nightweaver may be the lowest Lossum boss on our list, she is a near perfect fight as it is, which just kind of shows the quality of the Lossum world bosses and what remains on our list for what's to come.
Your timing is fortuitous, Cub. It's been long since I've seen one of your kind. But then, what is time to a god?
Well, on the other hand, we have Yaesha, which is the exact opposite of Lossum, where it has no consistency in its world bosses. Here is the Corrupted Ravager, the last of the three Yaesha world bosses. And if you remember, our last one was in 22nd place, and the Corrupted Ravager is pulling all the weight of Yaesha's world bosses here with 5th. And this is for a multitude of reasons. First of all, the fight is just great. It's amazing with the aggression that he pulls off, as well as the fact that he's not overly aggressive, which is surprising with how quickly he moves around the arena. He has one ad spawn attack, as well as a vortex attack, which is kind of rare, as his weak spot is extremely large, so his extreme aggressions balance out by how easy it is to aggressive him down, but it's not always perfectly easy, as he's a very melee-focused boss, so he will always be up in your face, preparing to force you back. As well as the music, once again, is just amazing for this. I'm just going to be saying that about every remaining boss, so be prepared for that kind of segment. But the Corrupted Ravager isn't only here for his boss quality, which is what it's meant to be, but it's his other options for his boss. Unlike many of the others, there is a pacifist route, and there's only one other boss in the game, which is Lyjusa. but that's a random chance to roll that, so I didn't include that in her ranking because there's no way to guarantee that. The Corrupted Ravager, you actually have a choice to kill the doe or heal it. Healing it will have the doe help you and stab the Ravager, causing him to bleed. If you kill the doe, you don't even have to fight the Ravager. You have helped the Ravager, and now he will reward you. But there is also somehow another 2 options to this fight, which is shoot the Ravager and then shoot the doe mid-fight, or shoot the Ravager and let him eat the doe, which will drop 2 more rewards, and will also change the fight, as you will either not have the bleed, or he will get an increase in power, the second phase, removing his weak point, but also giving an opening to shoot him with no harm at all when he's eating the doe. So the Corrupted Ravager, both as well as being a well storytelling moment, as because he is also from Remnant 1, continuing the story quite well, like the Corruptor's Guardian was from Kronos Before the Ashes, but he's also a storytelling moment within this game, and he's also just a phenomenal fight, even compared to our other ones in the top 10, but especially compared to Yeisha's other world bosses. He is really pulling the weight and easily the best boss on Yeisha by quite a lot.
Welcome, mortal, to the court of Phelan, benevolent and all-knowing. I am the slayer of the one true king, and ruler of all Fae. Be glad, mortal, for few are given the pleasure of such an audience. You are not Fae, yet you do not bear the cheerless apathy of the drow. You are something new, I should wager. Yes? Tell us, stranger, what are you?
And now we're into the second Lossum world boss, the Imposter Kings. Phelan, the Imposter Kings. These two are on the opposite to the Corruptor, nearly identical fights to each other. That's why they're lumped together like this. But they have another key storytelling moment, which is the splitting of Lossum and the combining of it that had many people in the Fae and Dram worlds, when the world combined, splitting in half, while the worlds themselves combined. These two are almost the direct cause of all the chaos that happens on Lossum, and you get the option to shoot and kill one of them to free the other from the imposter. The imposter, which they both are, but none of them realize that. They think they're plagued by an imposter, but they're actually the same person. It's really good visually, with the mirror showing both sides of the arena at once. This is before we even get into the boss fight, which is a very consistent swords duel between you and the Phelan or Phaeron, whoever you decide to kill. And overall, this fight is extremely bombastic and, for lack of a better term, epic, and creates quite a scene within the game. The Nightweaver is showing more of the horror that the Dran feel, while the Imposter Kings is the kind of honor the Fae feel for finally becoming the rulers they believe they are. So overall, this boss fight is an extremely nice thing in all regards. It's extremely nice visually, story, extremely nice fight, an amazing soundtrack once again. It's just an amazing soundtrack for this game. And overall, the best base game Lossum base boss fight, just in general, but also world boss. But even though they are the Imposter Kings, they aren't the true kings.
I shall not sully my throne with your unworthy blood! but a drop in my rain of blood. A lost whisper in the echo of eternity. Return to the nothingness from whence you came!
They can never compare to the original, the one true king, as he is the final boss of the Awakened King DLC, and this genocidal king is trying to eliminate the Fae for attempting to usurp him, which they tried to do, but he was sent into a slumber instead, so it was a very, very short coup. And when he returned, the root had caused him to go mad, and now he's trying to kill all the Fae. Even if you kill him, the roots still find their way in, so there is no real winning in this fight. But this is all a nice lore perspective for the fight, and once again, he also has an amazing OST. This leads into the fight, where he has his massive clobbering hammer with many Fae attached to it as his punishment for betraying him. If you break his hammer's chains wrapping the Fae mid-fight, they will break off of it and stab him, causing him to become staggered. This, combined with the fact that his weak spot is quite small normally, allows this fight to go on for a while, even with a smaller health bar that he has, as well as the fact that the Fae will also harm him when they stagger him. Otherwise, his main attacks include teleporting and keeping you at a specific distance that his club's odd timings will usually hit you if you're not prepared. His positioning-based attacks have you constantly moving instead of being prepared in one position, as these are also openings as you don't have to sprint for all of them. Once he gets to half health, he will have a massive ad phase in the middle, where he'll summon a bunch of the Dran to try and kill you. If you succeed in this phase and kill all the Dran, he will not restore any health. But if you don't, he will consume the Dran to heal him, which is both a punishment for not killing the ads, and both also a way to allow the ads to be gone in a natural way when you get back to fighting him one-on-one. This is the best Lawson fight, as it's a large, massive, towering foe that teleports, is really well designed, has amazing attack patterns, which both require dodging and positioning, which this game excels when a boss can force both of those for both attacking windows, pre-planning, and being quick on your feet, are all really great design decisions.
It is time. Prepare to meet your true fate, traveler. Your request has been accepted. The convergence will commence at once. Witness the end of your mortal coil.
Now, we have the final boss of the next and currently final DLC for the game, the Dark Horizon DLC, Alepsis Tora, the sentient, smack-talking black hole. So, yeah, this fight is very interesting as it has 3 different variants, depending on what you did on the overworld. You can either destroy his crystals, and depending how many you destroy, you get different boss results, so that's 2 of them. If you don't destroy any, he has a much harder variant. The footage is of the normal variant, but the harder variant has much larger attacks, has more health, all that sort of thing. But this boss is the best boss out of all the DLCs, and it's simply because it's amazingly well designed. It's amazing attack patterns, both swap between, as stated in most of the top fights, position based to immediate dodging, with the tendril-based attacks and the event horizon shooting both having a bit of both. All the many melees dodging and the pulsing walls that he shoots out both also require positioning. Overall, this boss fight is near perfect in every regard. Even the OST, once again, is near perfect. Here's some. Lore implications that he's a sentient black hole that absorbed the entire species on the route both implies that he is an insanely powerful being, as well as one that doesn't care for any life. He's also an Eldritch God that does the one thing every Eldritch God does when they are losing a fight, and that is grow tentacles. There is not an insane amount to say about this boss, simply because you just need to watch and see the amazing voice lines, audio, visuals, the attacks, everything is just near perfect for Alexis Tora. But it's near perfect, unlike our next contestant. Annihilation. Like, what were you expecting? If you played this game, you know Annihilation was going to be up here. He's a top 3 boss for almost anyone who plays this game. I personally place him as the best boss in the entire game, because what else could I? He's perfect. He has perfect design features. He uses everything this game has done amazingly. He uses amazing visual cues, audio cues. It's so annoying that you have to turn down the amazing, amazing music. Absolutely killing it with that track. You have to turn that down just to hear half the audio cues, which is the biggest problem with the fight, is that I can't hear the music that's so good because I need to use the audio to dodge him correctly. He has positioning-based attacks, he has a time to regen and heal, he has some attacks that even require you to move your attention off him. It's all just amazing, and this is just in the first phase, before he swaps into this glitched out reality of beyond the veil, where he starts throwing cursed, corrupted data at you. He brings the sword down and swipes it. The data has you waiting on position, the sword has you waiting on audio cues, and then he's going to flick back. He starts flickering back and forth, both phases at once. It's so well done. It has perfect tells, and the glitch where it swaps the frame rate issues, which is my actual one problem with the fight, is the frame rate can hurt a little bit when you swap between. Even on a higher end computer, it can sometimes work incorrectly, but when he glitches out, you can visually tell what attack he's going to go. So you have the audio cue you need to memorize for when the attack is, and then the visual for which one when they're flicking between them. This boss fight is just a perfect ending to Remnant 2, and the best fight in the game. It's quite sad to see that this is the end of the game. We're not getting any more content for this one. And with how the story concluded, this might be the end of the Remnant series. So I'm honestly quite sad that this is ending, but it's always great to leave a good thing on an amazing conclusion. And the final DLC and the final boss of the game and all that is making for such a perfect experience. The only issues with the game overall come from mainly locations other than the bosses. There's some balancing issues, but no more content needs to be added for this game to be the amazing masterpiece that it is. Honestly, it hurts that it didn't get nominated for anything that it so rightly deserves. Like the soundtrack, which I've pointed out quite a lot, it quite hurts that it wasn't nominated for the respect it deserves. But maybe we'll find another game just as good in future that can finally get some respect that it deserves.
But that's all from me. Thank you for watching.